Ambassador Krell had seen many things in his 300 cycles of life. He had witnessed the fall of the Multorax Empire, survived the Great Void War, and even managed to negotiate peace between the eternally feuding Zinth and Yarthak species. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the sheer absurdity of what he was witnessing in the Galactic Council chambers today. The human representatives sat there, calm as a frozen moon, while every other species in the chamber practically vibrated with barely contained terror. Well, everyone except the Zorathians, who were too proud to show fear, and the Quellians, who were apparently too stupid to understand what they were dealing with. "Let me get this straight," Krell said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of diplomatic experience. "You want us to select Earth's weakest fighter for this combat trial?" The human, who had introduced herself as Captain Maya Torres, nodded with the kind of casual confidence that made Krell primary stomach clench. "That's correct, Ambassador. We understand your concerns about our species' combat capabilities. To ease tensions and demonstrate our peaceful intentions, we're willing to have our least dangerous fighter represent us." At least dangerous. The words echoed through the chamber like a bad joke. Krell had read the reports. He had seen the footage. Humans didn't have a least dangerous category. They had extremely dangerous and run for your life and pray to whatever gods you believe in. Chancellor Vex Thorn of the Altarian Federation leaned forward, his multiple eyes blinking in what Krell recognized as poorly concealed relief. "This is acceptable. We choose our champion to face this weak human." Krell would have laughed if his species was capable of the sound. Instead, he made a low chittering noise that roughly translated to "you magnificent idiots." A selection process began immediately. The various species huddled in their respective corners, whispering and arguing about who would have the honor of defeating Earth's weakest representative. Krell watched the humans with growing fascination. Captain Torres was speaking quietly into a communication device, while her aide, a tall man named Lieutenant Kane Mitchell, was actually grinning. "Are you finding this amusing, Lieutenant?" Krell asked, his translator working overtime to convey the subtle tones of his inquiry. Mitchell's grin widened. "Oh, Ambassador, you have no idea. We've been waiting for this moment for months. The betting pools back home are going absolutely crazy." "Betting pools?" "Well, yeah, the odds were heavily in favor of someone asking for our weakest fighter. Humans love a good underdog story." Krell felt his secondary stomach drop. "And who exactly is your weakest fighter?" Captain Torres finished her communication and turned to face them. "That would be Marcus Webb. He's a librarian from New Seattle. 43 years old, married, 2 kids. His biggest combat experience is weekend amateur boxing matches at the local gym." A librarian. They were sending a librarian. The Zorathian delegation had apparently overheard this conversation because their leader, War Chief Gorth Nexus, began what Krell could only describe as the most terrifying laugh he had ever heard. It sounded like 2 starships colliding in a supernova. "A librarian," Gorth Nexus boomed. "They mock us with a keeper of books. I will face this human myself." "Actually," Torres said politely, "we've already selected our champion. The decision is yours to make." The various species spent the next hour arguing about who would get to claim the easy victory. The Draxians wanted to send their young champion, Cathara 7, to gain experience. The Nemothans thought it would be good training for their second-tier fighters. Even the usually peaceful Veldorians were considering putting forward a candidate. In the end, it was the Quellians who won the right to face the human. Their champion, a massive creature named Brak Tool, stood nearly 4 meters tall and weighed approximately half a ton. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where everything tried to kill everything else, and they had developed accordingly. Brak Tool had never lost a fight, never even been seriously injured in combat. "This will be over quickly," Brak Tool announced, flexing arms that were thicker than most species' torsos. "I will make it merciful for the bookkeeper." Krell noticed that the humans were now actively trying not to laugh. Captain Torres had developed a slight twitch in her left eye, and Lieutenant Mitchell had turned away completely, his shoulders shaking with suppressed mirth. "Is there something amusing about this situation?" Chancellor Vexthorn demanded. "Oh, not at all," Taurus replied, her voice perfectly level. "We appreciate your consideration for our representatives' well-being." The combat arena was prepared with all the pomp and circumstance befitting an interspecies diplomatic event. Representatives from 47 different civilizations gathered to witness what everyone assumed would be a quick demonstration of human frailty. The betting odds were apparently 7,000 to 1 against the human. Krell Voss found himself in the VIP section, surrounded by dignitaries who were already discussing the terms of Earth's inevitable surrender. The Multorax ambassador was particularly smug, going on about how this would finally put the human problem to rest. "Mark my words," the Multorax was saying, "after this humiliation, Earth will be much more reasonable in trade negotiations." The human section was surprisingly quiet. About a dozen humans sat together, watching the preparations with the kind of calm attention that Krell Voss was beginning to recognize as deeply concerning. They weren't nervous. They weren't excited. They were just waiting. Braktul entered the arena first, to thunderous applause from the non-human sections. He was truly a sight to behold, muscles upon muscles, covered in the ritual scars of his people, carrying weapons that looked like they could cut through starship hulls. He roared his challenge to the assembled crowd, a sound that made the arena's structure vibrate. Then Marcus Webb walked in. He was exactly what Captain Torres had described, a perfectly ordinary middle-aged human male. He stood about average height for his species, with the kind of soft build that suggested he spent more time reading than fighting. His hair was already showing gray at the temples, and he wore simple exercise clothing that looked like it had been purchased at a general store. The crowd fell silent. This was Earth's fighter? This was the representative of the species that had somehow managed to fight the Hive Collective to a standstill? Braktul looked confused. "Where is the warrior? I was told I would face a human fighter." Marcus Webb raised his hand politely. "That would be me, sir. I'm Marcus Webb and I'll be representing Earth today." The silence stretched for several long seconds. Then someone in the Draxian section started laughing. Soon half the arena was filled with various species versions of laughter. The poor human looked completely overwhelmed by the response. "Are you certain you're in the right place?" Braktul asked, not unkindly. "Perhaps you're looking for the library?" No, I'm definitely supposed to be here," Marcus replied, checking a small piece of paper he had pulled from his pocket. "Marcus Webb, representing Earth in single combat. That's me." Krell Voss glanced at the human section. They were still sitting quietly, but now they were all smiling. Not the kind of nervous smiles you might expect from people watching their representative about to be obliterated, but the kind of knowing smiles that suggested they were in on some enormous joke. The referee, a neutral zone AI construct, began explaining the rules. Standard combat protocols, no external weapons, no permanent harm to be inflicted, victory by submission or incapacitation. The usual diplomatic niceties that were supposed to make civilized beings feel better about sanctioned violence. "Are you sure about this?" Braktul asked Marcus directly. "I do not wish to harm someone who is not a warrior." Marcus smiled, and for just a moment Krell Voss caught something in the human's expression that made his blood run cold. It was there and gone in an instant, but it was unmistakably predatory. "I appreciate your concern," Marcus said, "but I've been looking forward to this. It's not often a librarian gets to represent his entire species." The fight began. Braktul approached cautiously, clearly still uncomfortable with the situation. He was a warrior bred for combat, and this felt less like a fight and more like bullying. He made a half-hearted swipe with one massive arm, obviously intending to end things quickly and with minimal damage. Marcus wasn't there. The human had moved with fluid grace, stepping just outside the range of the attack while simultaneously positioning himself at Braktul's flank. The Quellian spun to face him, confusion evident on his features. "Asked for a librarian," Braktul admitted, then launched a proper attack. What followed was the most educational 3 minutes of Krell Voss's life. He watched as Marcus Webb, mild-mannered keeper of books, systematically dismantled a warrior who had never known defeat. The human moved like water, like smoke, like something that wasn't quite bound by the same physical laws as everyone else. Every attack that Bractul launched was anticipated, avoided, or redirected. The massive Quellian found himself striking empty air, stumbling past his target, growing increasingly frustrated as the small human stayed just out of reach. Stand still and fight. Bractul roared, swinging both arms in a wide arc that should have been impossible to avoid. Marcus ducked under the swing and, almost casually, tapped Bractul behind the knee. The Quellian's leg buckled slightly, and he stumbled forward. It was a gentle touch, barely noticeable, but it hit a pressure point that sent numbing signals through the warrior's nervous system. "Sorry about that," Marcus said politely. "Occupational hazard of studying anatomy texts." The crowd was no longer laughing. They were watching with growing amazement as the human continued to outmaneuver his opponent. Bractul was breathing heavily now, his attacks becoming wild and desperate. "How?" the Quellian demanded. "How does a keeper of books move like this?" Marcus smiled again, and this time there was no mistaking the predatory gleam in his eyes. "Well, you see, I wasn't always a librarian. I used to have a different job." "What job?" "I was a kindergarten teacher." The arena fell absolutely silent. Even the AI referee seemed to pause in its monitoring. "You see," Marcus continued, easily sidestepping another attack, "people don't realize how dangerous 5-year-old humans can be. They're fast, unpredictable, and they have absolutely no sense of self-preservation. Managing 30 of them at once, that requires reflexes you can't imagine." He demonstrated by catching Bractul's wrist mid-swing and redirecting the attack so that the Quellian punched himself in the face. "Plus," Marcus added, "I coached Little League baseball for 15 years. Do you know what Little League parents are like when they think the umpire made a bad call? That's where I learned real combat skills." Bractul was now completely off balance, both physically and mentally. He had been prepared to fight a warrior, a soldier, even a skilled civilian. He had not been prepared to fight someone whose combat experience came from dealing with small children and their angry parents. "This is impossible," he gasped, swinging wildly at the human who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. "Oh, this is nothing," Marcus replied cheerfully. "You should see me during story time when the kids get restless. Now that's a real battle." The end came suddenly. Bractul, exhausted and confused, overextended himself on a particularly desperate attack. Marcus simply stepped aside, reached out with 2 fingers, and touched a specific point on the Quellian's neck. Tul's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed like a falling tree. The arena was completely silent. Marcus knelt beside the unconscious warrior and checked his pulse. "He'll be fine," he announced to the crowd. "Just a little pressure point technique I learned from a martial arts book I cataloged last year. He should wake up in about 10 minutes." He stood up, brushed off his clothes, and looked around the arena with mild confusion. "So, did I win?" The AI referee, sounding somewhat stunned, announced, "Victory to the human representative, Marcus Webb of Earth." The human section erupted in cheers. Captain Torres was openly laughing now, while Lieutenant Mitchell was making notes on what appeared to be a betting slip. The rest of the crowd sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Krell Voss felt his worldview shifting in ways that would take him decades to fully comprehend. They had asked for Earth's weakest fighter. Earth had sent them a librarian, and somehow, impossibly, the librarian had won. As Marcus Webb waved politely to the crowd and headed toward the exit, Krell Voss realized that they had all made a fundamental error in their understanding of humans. They had assumed that least dangerous meant weak. They had failed to consider that for a species like humans, least dangerous might still be absolutely terrifying. The implications were staggering. If this was what Earth considered their weakest fighter, what did their actual warriors look like? What kind of training did they undergo? What kind of world produced kindergarten teachers who could defeat seasoned warriors with pressure points learned from library books? As the crowd began to disperse, Krell noticed that several ambassadors were already making urgent calls to their home governments. The Maltorax representative looked like he was about to be sick. The Draxians were huddled in what appeared to be an emergency strategy session. Only the humans seemed relaxed, chatting among themselves as if nothing unusual had happened. As if sending a librarian to defeat a legendary warrior was just another Tuesday for them. Krell made a mental note to himself: never, ever ask humans to send their strongest fighter. The galaxy simply wasn't ready for that level of terror. The first part of what would undoubtedly become a very long and very expensive lesson in human psychology was complete. And somehow Krell suspected that the worst was yet to come. 3 days had passed since the incident, and Ambassador Krell still couldn't sleep properly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Marcus Webb's polite smile and heard those terrifying words, "I was a kindergarten teacher." The Galactic Council was in complete upheaval. Emergency sessions had been called, trade agreements were being frantically reviewed, and at least 6 species had quietly increased their military budgets. The Quellians had gone into what they called strategic meditation, which was essentially hiding in their embassy and refusing to talk to anyone. Meanwhile, the humans acted like nothing had happened. Ambassador Krell? Captain Torres approached his desk in the diplomatic quarter, carrying what appeared to be a gift basket. "I brought you some Earth delicacies. Thought you might enjoy them." Krell stared at the basket with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for explosive devices. What are they?" "Oh, just some cookies my grandmother made, fresh coffee from Brazil, and a few books Marcus thought you might find interesting." She smiled that same terrifying human smile. "He signed them for you." "Like the books." Of course there were books. Krell picked up the top volume with trembling appendages. It was titled Child Development and Behavioral Management Techniques. The inscription read, "To Ambassador Krell, with appreciation for a fair fight. Remember, patience and understanding solve more problems than force ever could. Best wishes, Marcus Webb, Head Librarian, New Seattle Public Library." He's sending me parenting advice," Krell whispered. "Actually, those are teaching techniques," Torres corrected. "But they work pretty well for diplomatic negotiations too. Marcus has been helping train our diplomatic corps for years." The implications hit Krell like a cargo freighter. "Your diplomatic corps is trained by kindergarten teachers?" "Well, not exclusively. But Marcus has been a consultant since 2387. Turns out managing interspecies negotiations isn't that different from managing a classroom full of sugar-high 5-year-olds. Before Krell could process this information fully, alarms began blaring throughout the station. When the emergency broadcast system crackled to life, all diplomatic personnel to emergency stations. Code red. Repeat, code red. Within minutes, the main council chamber was packed with representatives from every major species. Chancellor Vex Thorn stood at the central podium, his multiple eyes wide with panic. "We have a situation," he announced. "Long-range sensors have detected a Zerath Dominion battle fleet approaching our position. Estimated arrival, 6 hours. The chamber erupted in panic. The Zerath Dominion were the galaxy's premier military force, a species that had conquered half the known universe through sheer brutality and tactical superiority. They had been silent for decades, but their sudden appearance could only mean one thing: they had come to claim Earth as their next prize. "How many ships?" demanded War Chief Gorth Nexus, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Preliminary scans show approximately 500 vessels, including at least 12 dreadnoughts." The number sent a chill through the assembled crowd. Most species' entire military forces consisted of fewer than 100 ships. The Zerath had brought an annihilation fleet. "Where is the human fleet?" someone shouted. Captain Torres, who had been quietly listening, stepped forward. "Earth's defensive fleet is currently engaged in training exercises in the Outer Rim. They won't be able to return for at least 8 hours. Then we're all dead, the Maltorax ambassador moaned. The Azarath will destroy the station and everyone on it. Actually, Torres said calmly, we do have one ship in the area. And the transport vessel that brought Marcus home yesterday. It's still docked at Bay 7. Krell Voss felt his sanity slipping away. A transport ship? Against a battle fleet? It's not exactly a transport ship, Torres admitted. It's more of a, well, it's complicated. Before anyone could ask what she meant, the station's communication array lit up with an incoming transmission. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of a Zerath command ship. The creature standing at the center was easily the most terrifying being Krell Voss had ever seen, 3 meters tall, covered in chitinous armor, with eyes like burning coals. I am War Master Thak Vorn of the Azarath Dominion, the creature announced. We have come to claim the humans' homeworld. Surrender the location of Earth, and we will grant you swift deaths. The chamber fell silent. Several representatives were openly weeping. The Draxians had apparently fainted. Excuse me, came a polite voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to see Marcus Webb, still wearing his simple civilian clothes, raising his hand like a student asking a question. What? Thak Vorn snarled. I'm Marcus Webb, representative of Earth. I'm afraid I can't give you our homeworld's location. It's classified information. The War Master's laugh was like grinding metal. You are the human representative? You look pathetic even by human standards. Well, I'm actually a librarian, so I'm probably not the best judge of human combat capabilities, Marcus replied cheerfully. But I do have a question. Speak, before I decide to kill you slowly. Are you familiar with Earth's educational system? The question was so unexpected that even Thak Vorn seemed confused. What? Our educational system. You see, I've been thinking about your invasion plans and I'm curious about your research methods. Did you study human culture before deciding to attack us? We do not need to study inferior species before we crush them. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Right. No research. That's actually a classic mistake. You see, in library science, we have a saying, research prevents embarrassment. It's basically rule number 1. Are you mocking me, human? Oh no, not at all. I'm just trying to understand your strategic thinking. For example, did you know that Earth's transport ships are actually built by the same companies that make our warships? Something cold settled in Krell Voss's stomach. Marcus, what exactly is docked at Bay 7? Oh, that's the U.S. Homework Helper. It's a pedagogy-class vessel. A what? Fictional transport. Designed to take classes on field trips to dangerous locations. You know, black holes, active war zones, that sort of thing. Really excellent safety features. Thak Vorn was growing impatient. Enough. You have 1 hour to surrender, or we will demonstrate the might of the Azarath Dominion. The transmission cut out, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Marcus, Captain Torres said quietly, I think it's time. Time for what? Krell Voss demanded. Marcus sighed and pulled out a small communication device. Homework helper, this is teacher. Are the children ready for today's lesson? A cheerful voice replied, all students are prepared, teacher. Shall we begin the demonstration? Yes, please. And remember, no permanent damage. We're trying to set a good example. Understood, teacher. Educational objectives prioritized. The station's external sensors suddenly registered an energy signature that made the monitoring equipment nearly overload. Through the viewports, Krell Voss could see the transport ship at Bay 7. It was transforming. What had appeared to be a simple civilian vessel was unfolding like a flower. Weapon systems emerged from hidden compartments. Shield generators came online. The ship's hull reconfigured itself into something that looked less like a transport and more like a concentrated nightmare. What in the name of the void is that? Chancellor Vex Thorn whispered. Field trip vessel, Marcus replied. Designed to protect students during educational excursions. Earth takes child safety very seriously. The Zerath fleet had apparently noticed the transformation because they immediately opened fire. Hundreds of weapons discharges lit up the space around the station. The homework helper's shields absorbed the entire barrage without even flickering. Beginning Lesson 1, the ship's AI announced cheerfully the importance of proper research before engaging in conflict. What followed was the most one-sided battle in recorded galactic history. The homework helper moved through the Zerath fleet like a teacher correcting poorly done homework. It didn't destroy ships, it disabled them. Weapons systems were surgically removed. Engines were shut down. Life support was carefully maintained while propulsion was eliminated. Within 20 minutes, the entire Zerath battle fleet was floating helplessly in space. Lesson complete, the AI announced. All students have been placed in timeout pending proper behavioral correction. The chamber watched in absolute silence as the homework helper returned to its transport configuration and docked calmly at Bay 7. Marcus checked his watch. Well, that was educational. I should probably get back to Earth, though. The library board meeting is tomorrow, and I need to prepare my budget presentation. Budget presentation? Krell asked weakly. Oh yes, we're requesting funding for a new children's reading program. Much more challenging than dealing with invasion fleets, honestly. Politicians ask much harder questions than alien war masters. As Marcus headed for the exit, he paused at Krell seat. Oh, Ambassador? You might want to call your government. The Zerath are going to need somewhere to stay while they think about their behavior. Earth is willing to provide educational rehabilitation services, but we'll need to work out the diplomatic details. After Marcus left, the chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, Chancellor Vex Thorn spoke. I think we need to completely restructure our understanding of human society. You think? Krell replied sarcastically. Their librarians defeat our warriors, their teachers command warships, and their transport vessels can disable entire battle fleets. What's next? Are their janitors going to turn out to be master strategists? Captain Torres, who had been quietly observing, cleared her throat. Actually, our head of planetary sanitation is a former general, but he prefers his current job. Says it's more intellectually stimulating. Krell put his head in his hands, and again, of course he does. Over the following weeks, the galaxy slowly adapted to its new reality. The Zerath Dominion, thoroughly humbled, enrolled in what Earth called a cultural sensitivity and conflict resolution program. The Quellians emerged from their meditation to formally apologize and request martial arts lessons. The Draxians started a student exchange program with Earth's kindergarten system. And Marcus Webb returned to his library, where he continued to check out books, help children with their homework, and occasionally consult on interspecies diplomatic crises. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a species that entrusts its most precious members to the care of individuals capable of defeating trained warriors with pressure points learned from library books. Hux. The final report filed by Ambassador Krell contained a single recommendation: under no circumstances should any galactic power ever ask to face Earth's strongest fighter. The librarian was terrifying enough. The report was classified at the highest levels and distributed to every major government in the galaxy. It became known as the Webb Doctrine, and it fundamentally changed how the galaxy approached human relations. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks completely harmless and calls their warship the homework helper. And that, Krell reflected as he finally managed to get some sleep, was the most human thing of all.